Have you ever thought that one small moment could change your entire life? I never believed it until the day my neighbor knocked on my door with a simple pot of soup. That single visit turned my quiet, lonely world into something bright and full of hope again. Let me tell you where this all happened. Maybe you're sitting somewhere peaceful right now, listening to this story. Perhaps you're in a small town where you can smell fresh bread baking. Or maybe you're in a busy city with cars honking outside. Wherever you are, I want you to imagine my story happening in your own neighborhood, on a street just like yours. My name is Helen, and I'm 62 years old. I've lived in the same house for almost 30 years now. Over all those years, I've watched the trees grow taller, the sidewalks crack a little more, and the houses show their age. But everything still stands strong and proud. My kids grew up here, but they moved away to different cities for their jobs. The house that used to be full of laughing children and loud music is now very quiet. Most days, I'm okay with the silence. But some evenings, that quietness feels so heavy that it makes my chest feel tight. 3 years ago, a man named Daniel moved into the house next door. He was older than me, around 68 years old. His wife had passed away, and he moved here to start fresh. Daniel was calm and thoughtful. He had a warm voice that made you feel comfortable, like sitting next to a cozy fire. We would wave to each other when getting our mail or working in our gardens, but we never really talked much. Just quick hellos and comments about the weather. Nothing more than that. Everything changed on one ordinary fall evening. I had spent the day doing simple things like watering my plants, eating dinner alone, and trying to read a book that couldn't keep my attention. When it got dark, my house felt extra quiet. I could hear every little sound, even my own breathing. That's when I heard a knock on my door. It was a strong knock, but not rushed or angry. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there holding a big covered pot. He had a nervous but friendly smile on his face. "Good evening, Helen," he said. "I made way too much stew tonight. I thought maybe you'd like to have some with me." I was really surprised. Nobody had done something this nice for me in a long time. "That's so kind of you," I told him. "You didn't have to do this." He smiled bigger this time. "I know I didn't have to, but I wanted to." I stepped back and let him come inside. As he walked into my kitchen with that pot, something felt different. The wonderful smell of vegetables and spices filled my house, and suddenly the quietness didn't feel so sad anymore. We sat down at my kitchen table with bowls of hot stew in front of us. Steam rose up from the food like tiny clouds. At first, we talked about simple things like the cold weather and our gardens. But as time passed, our conversation got deeper and more meaningful. He told me about his wife who had died. He spoke about her with so much love and kindness, never sounding bitter or angry about losing her. I started telling him about raising my children, all the crazy, wonderful moments, the mess they made, the love I felt, all the laughter that filled this house. I told him how sometimes the quiet now feels like it might swallow me up completely. Daniel listened to me in a special way. He wasn't just waiting for his turn to talk. He wasn't thinking about what to say next. He was really, truly listening to every word I said. At one point, he looked straight into my eyes and said something I'll never forget. "You know, Helen, being lonely and being alone are two different things. You don't have to face the quiet all by yourself." Those words touched something deep inside my heart that I thought was gone forever. Nobody had understood my loneliness in so many years. And nobody had offered to help carry that heavy feeling without wanting something back. We kept talking about books we liked, questions about life, what it feels like to grow older while still learning new things about yourself. His questions made me want to share more. They never felt pushy or nosy. And I laughed that night. Real, genuine laughter that came from deep in my belly. I was shocked at how natural and easy it felt. When Daniel finally stood up to leave, I couldn't believe how late it had gotten. At my front door, he stopped and looked at me with honest, kind eyes. "Thank you for spending the evening with me," he said softly. "Thank you for knocking on my door," I replied, meaning every single word. That night in bed, I kept thinking about what he said. You don't have to face the quiet all by yourself. Those words went around and around in my mind. They filled the rooms that had felt too big for just one person. I thought about how his visit had changed my whole house. How his attention made me feel less like someone just waiting for life to end, and more like someone who was really living. As I fell asleep, I realized that evening gave me more than just food and conversation. It reminded me that friendship and connection can happen at any age. Sometimes the things we don't plan become the most important moments of our lives. The next morning felt gentler somehow, like the night had left behind a small gift of warmth. While I washed the pot Daniel had brought, I watched steam rise like it was reminding me of our connection. My house felt different now. Not louder or more crowded, just less lonely. It was like the rooms remembered what it felt like to hold more than one person. Daniel came back around the middle of the morning with 2 soft knocks that sounded just like his personality. When I answered, he stood there without any excuse for visiting. "I came to get my pot," he said with warm eyes, "and to make sure you slept okay after we talked so long." "I did sleep well," I told him honestly. "But your words stayed in my head for a while, settling in slowly." He nodded like that was exactly how important words should work, taking their time to find the right place. He didn't ask to come in, but he didn't leave either. We stood in that comfortable space that good neighbors understand. Finally, I said, "I've been wanting to ask you something. How do you keep your herb garden looking so healthy?" "Mine seems to do whatever it wants no matter what I do." We walked to my small back patio, and he looked at my struggling plants with careful attention, like he was reading an important letter. "You're being too gentle with them," he said kindly. "They actually need some structure and firm care to grow well. Would it be okay if I helped fix them?" "Please do," I said, surprised by how comfortable I felt with this. His hands moved with confidence as he trimmed and arranged the plants. He explained things about spacing, sunlight, and how living things sometimes need clear boundaries to grow their best. I couldn't help thinking about my own life, and how hard things had shaped me in ways I never expected. He must have noticed. I was thinking deeply because he looked up with soft curiosity. "I'm learning," I said carefully, "that I don't always have to hold everything together all by myself. Being strong and accepting help aren't opposite things," he replied with quiet wisdom. "Even the strongest buildings need a solid foundation to stand on." That afternoon started a new pattern in our lives. He'd walk by during his daily walk and ask if I needed anything from town. I'd watch from my window as he carried heavy grocery bags that would have been hard for me to lift alone. Small, thoughtful actions that added up to something really meaningful. About a week later, heavy rain poured down hard, leaving my gutters overflowing and a loose roof tile flapping in the wind. I pulled out my old ladder and stood beside it, finally accepting that I really needed help. I didn't even have to call Daniel. He had developed that special sense that good neighbors have, knowing when help is needed without being asked. "Please let me fix that for you," he said, walking over calmly. "You can pay me back with a good book recommendation." He climbed the ladder carefully, treating each step with respect. I handed him the tools he needed: hammer, nails, the spare tile. Our hands touched sometimes in the dance of working together. When the repair was finished, my whole house seemed to relax with relief. At the bottom of the ladder, he stood close enough that I could see tiny wood shavings on his shirt from whatever project he was working on at home. "Thank you so much," I said with real gratitude. "You're welcome," he replied warmly. Then, after a pause, "Would it be okay if I gave you a hug?" "Yes," I answered, surprised by how ready I felt. The hug was short but meaningful. Not desperate or fake, just completely real and honest. The kind of hug that quietly says, I see who you really are, and I value that person. When we stepped back, the rain had become a soft drizzle. He looked at the clearing sky and said, "This should clear up soon." It did exactly that, leaving everything smelling fresh and new. We developed a comfortable routine that wouldn't seem special to anyone watching. He built a storage shelf for my laundry room without making a big deal about it. I baked a cinnamon spice cake and wrapped pieces for him in wax paper, which he treated like precious gifts. We kept our own separate lives while choosing to share certain moments. It wasn't about becoming one person or living together. It was about two complete people choosing to walk some paths side by side, stopping together when something beautiful deserved shared attention. I slowly learned things about him. He loved history books but read mystery novels quickly just for fun. His skills came from growing up in a small farming town where everyone had to know how to fix things. His sister called every Sunday, and his daughter sent way too many photos of her dog dressed in funny costumes. He learned about me too. My son traveled all the time for work. My daughter was super careful and thoughtful about everything. And my achy joints could predict weather changes better than the news could. One evening, Patricia from down the street organized a community event at our library, where neighbors could share personal stories and essays. She invited me to read something I'd written. Saying no would have been easier and more comfortable. At first, I told myself I was too old to be vulnerable in public. Then I remembered I'd been quietly brave for decades without anyone noticing. Daniel heard about the event and came without announcing it. He just showed up, found a seat in the back, and listened with complete attention. My essay was about how a home makes different sounds at different times in life. How a house with little kids is full of creaks, running feet, and constant noise. How it settles into steady rhythms during the middle years. How an older house speaks gently, inviting you to slow down and remember everything that happened. As I read my words out loud, my voice got stronger and more confident. The way you walk more surely when you trust the ground beneath your feet. When I looked up while reading, his expression held that focused attention I'd come to value so much. Seeing my words reflected in his eyes gave them new weight and meaning. Afterward, he didn't say much. On our quiet walk home, he simply said, "You write with the clarity of someone who knows exactly where things belong." I laughed at first, then stopped suddenly because the compliment reached a place deep inside me that had been waiting for someone to notice and appreciate it. We weren't magically perfect or free from small conflicts. Real relationships never are. One Monday morning, he completely forgot we'd planned to go to the farmer's market together. I sat by my window with cooling coffee, trying to pretend the disappointment wasn't weighing heavy in my chest when he showed up an hour later. Looking sorry and concerned, I let him in and allowed my disappointment to exist honestly, instead of hiding it. He didn't try to bury my feelings under excuses or explanations. He simply said with direct honesty, "I completely forgot our plans, and that hurt you. You're important to me, Helen. I'm truly sorry." The apology mattered precisely because it was straightforward and honest. No defensive arguing, no making excuses, just plain truth. We moved past it together. Our friendship stronger because of the honesty we shared. As the weather got colder, we practiced the delicate art of caring without assuming or pushing. He'd ask, "Would you like company at your doctor's appointment?" Sometimes I'd say yes and sometimes no, and he respected both answers equally. I'd ask, "Should I pick up those woodworking supplies you mentioned?" And he genuinely appreciated that I remembered such small details. We were mature adults building something real through respectful questions, honest answers, and clear communication about what we needed and wanted. On the first really cold evening of winter, The electricity flickered off just long enough to remind us that nature controls more than we like to admit. I lit candles throughout my house and stood at my window, watching the darkness. Across the yard, I could see his shadow moving with a flashlight, checking things. Moments later, that flashlight beam appeared at my door, followed by 2 careful knocks. "Are you doing okay in there?" he asked with concern when I opened the door. "I'm fine," I assured him. "Would you like a candle? I should warn you, it smells really strongly like vanilla." "That sounds perfect," he said with an easy smile. The power came back on moments later with a grudging hum. But he didn't rush to leave. He set the candle down on my table and said, "I've been thinking about something. Would you be interested in working on a project together? Something that takes time and patience, working side by side. I have some beautiful oak wood that deserves a proper purpose." "I would absolutely love that," I said honestly, feeling simple pleasure at being invited to do something requiring patience and shared effort over time. The bench building project filled several peaceful weekends. He measured carefully multiple times, then cut deliberately, then sometimes measured and cut again, because natural materials don't always cooperate with even the best plans. I sanded wooden pieces until I understood why experienced woodworkers develop relationships with their tools. We had a friendly debate about the final finish. He wanted natural oil that would age beautifully, while I preferred protective coating. We found a compromise, the way people do when they plan to use something together for years. When we finished the bench, we placed it on my front porch and didn't immediately sit down. We stood quietly side by side, shoulders nearly touching, admiring what we'd created together. "May I?" he asked softly, reaching for my hand like a gentle question rather than an assumption. "Yes, you may," I said, lacing my fingers with his. We sat together on our new bench. It held our weight firmly and solidly. Soft evening light fell across everything. The world continued its normal business, yet somehow everything felt different and beautiful. I felt his hand holding mine the way a house feels, when a lamp is placed in exactly the right spot. Not a burden at all, but a purpose gracefully fulfilled. Later, after we'd found the bench's perfect position for watching evening arrive, he turned toward me with the same thoughtful care he'd shown that first night when he brought soup. "Helen," he said, speaking my name with respect, "I understand your life has its own pace and rhythms. I'm not trying to rush anything, but I want to be honest about what this relationship means to me. I care about you deeply, not as an escape from loneliness, not as an echo of my past, but as a genuine choice I'm making with complete awareness. Some declarations need drama and applause. This one didn't. It entered our space the way a trusted friend arrives when you've told them they're always welcome and never need to knock. I felt the truth of his words move through me as naturally as breathing. "I care deeply about you too," I said honestly. "And I don't need our connection to be more complicated than what it naturally is." He nodded with certainty, the kind of nod a craftsman gives when pieces fit together perfectly without forcing. "May I kiss you?" he asked gently, as though my permission mattered more than the action itself. "Yes," I said clearly, meaning it with every part of my well-lived self. The kiss was unhurried, gentle and honest, like placing a final piece into a puzzle you hadn't realized you'd been assembling over years through countless small moments. There was no performance to it. The porch light hummed. A car drove past somewhere. The tree we'd pruned together rustled in the evening air. When we pulled apart, the world stayed the same. Yet something inside me had settled more peacefully into place than ever before. After that meaningful evening, our days weren't extraordinary to anyone except us. He started teaching woodworking classes at the community center, sharing his knowledge. I joined a weekly reading group that met on Thursday evenings, our voices taking turns like music being created together. We learned each other's detailed histories at a pace that honored both our journeys. When grief surfaced for him on anniversaries of loss, we allowed its space between us as a welcomed guest rather than something to hide. When certain memories made my throat tight with emotion, he waited patiently, offering water with quiet understanding that caring is an active practice. Our neighbors gradually noticed our relationship, without making it neighborhood gossip. The widow 2 houses down squeezed my hand one afternoon and said warmly, "It's lovely when good people find each other." Patricia left a small flowering plant on our bench with a note reading simply, "For the porch that holds meaningful conversations." We accepted these kindnesses with grace without turning our private relationship into a public spectacle. One evening, snow began falling tentatively at first. Then with increasing commitment, the street grew quiet in that distinctive way winter weather creates when demanding your attention. We sat on our handcrafted bench, bundled in heavy coats, watching the familiar world transform into something softer and more forgiving. He squeezed my hand once gently, then continued holding it peacefully. After comfortable silence, he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking about that first evening, bringing the stew, working up courage to knock. I almost didn't do it. I talked myself out of coming at least twice." "What made you finally do it?" I asked with curiosity, realizing that kindness kept private serves no purpose. He said with quiet wisdom, "It needed to move beyond my walls and reach another person to have real meaning." We laughed softly together, then settled into peaceful silence. I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling not rescued or dramatically transformed, but thoughtfully reconnected to my own life with steadier footing than I'd had in years. The unexpected had arrived with courtesy, asked permission to stay, and conducted itself as though gratitude came as naturally as breathing. If you're listening right now from a familiar chair in a room that holds your daily habits, please let me share what I learned through experience. The moments that matter most often announce themselves quietly rather than dramatically. The words that endure are often gentle ones rather than grand speeches. Respect isn't just politeness before love. Sometimes respect is love itself, learning how to express its deepest truth. I wasn't expecting my neighbor to knock that autumn evening. He did anyway, and by opening that door and welcoming him inside, I discovered the best parts of myself emerging again, ready to belong to my front porch, to the fading evening light, to meaningful friendship that understands the difference between empty noise and genuine harmony, and chooses to create something beautiful together. Thank you for letting me share this meaningful part of my life. May you recognize the truly meaningful moments when they arrive unexpectedly at your door, whatever form they take.